A married couple is in bed one morning chatting about their dreams. The wife says, I had a weird dream last night. I was at a men's auction. Long ones were going for $100, thick ones for $200. The husband laughs. Oh yeah? What would mine have gone for? She smirks. They were giving ones like yours away for free. He grins and says, That's wild. I had a dream about a women's auction. Let's just say the high-end ones were going for $500 to $1,000. The wife, curious, asks, What about mine? He looks at her and goes, That's where they were holding the auction. Two guys are standing in line at the gates of heaven. One turns to the other and says, So how'd you die? The other replies, I froze to death. You? I had a heart attack. Oh no, how'd that happen? Well, I thought my wife was cheating on me, so I rushed home from work, ran upstairs, and there she was, sound asleep, alone. But I didn't believe it. I tore through the house, checked under the bed, in the closet, nothing. I sprinted back upstairs, and that's when I had a heart attack. The first guy sighs and says, That's ironic. Why's that? If you had checked the fridge, we'd both still be alive. A mom comes home from work and notices her kids peeking out from behind the couch, clearly freaked out. She asks, What's going on? One of the kids says, Aunt Sally was here, and she didn't have any clothes on. Shocked, the mom rushes to the bedroom and finds her husband lying on the bed, sweaty and flustered. What is going on? She asks. He pants. I think I'm having a heart attack. She says, Oh my gosh, I'm calling 911. As she heads to grab her phone, she opens the bathroom closet and finds Aunt Sally hiding, also in the Without missing a beat, the mom gives her a slap and says, Unbelievable! My husband is having a heart attack, and you're running around scaring the kids? A girl is talking to her guy friend and says, I found condoms in my boyfriend's jacket, but we don't use condoms. When I asked him about it, he said he uses them to, take care of himself. She looks at her friend and asks, Do you ever do that? He shrugs and says, Sure. Shocked, she asks, Wait, you actually use them for that? He pauses and replies, Oh, I thought you meant, do I lie to my girlfriend? Two priests decided to take a vacation in Hawaii. Wanting to really relax, they agreed. No collars, no black suits, nothing that would give away they were clergy. As soon as their plane landed, they hit a local shop and bought the wildest tourist outfits you could imagine. Flashy shirts, loud shorts, sandals, sunglasses, the whole package. The next morning, they hit the beach, dressed head to toe like total tourists. Sitting back in their chairs, sipping drinks, soaking in the sun. Life was perfect. That's when a stunning blonde in a tiny bikini strolled right past them, smiled sweetly, and said, Good morning, Father. Good morning, Father. She nodded at each of them and walked away like it was the most normal thing in the world. The priests were floored. How on earth did she know? Determined not to be recognized, the next day they went back to the store and bought even crazier outfits, the kind you can hear before you see. Dressed in their new, over-the-top beachwear, they returned to the sand, ready to blend in. But wouldn't you know it? The same blonde appeared, this time in an even tinier string bikini. She walked right up to them, flashed a smile, and once again said, Good morning, Father. Good morning, Father. Finally, one priest couldn't take it anymore and asked, Excuse me, young lady, we are priests, but how in the world did you know? She laughed and replied, Oh, come on, Father, it's me, Sister Angela. This blonde decides one day that she is sick and tired of all these blonde jokes and how all blondes are perceived as stupid. So she decides to show her husband that blondes really are smart. While her husband is off at work, she decides that she is going to paint a couple of rooms in the house. The next day, right after her husband leaves for work, She gets down to the task at hand. Her husband arrives home at 5:30 and smells the distinctive smell of paint. He walks into the living room and finds his wife lying on the floor in a pool of sweat. He notices that she is wearing a ski jacket and a fur coat at the same time. He goes over and asks her if she is okay. She replies yes. He asks what she is doing. She replies that she wanted to prove to him that not all blonde women are dumb, and she wanted to do it by painting the house. He then asks her why she has a ski jacket over her fur coat. She replies that she was reading the directions on the paint can and they said, "For best results, put on 2 coats." Ben went on safari with his wife and mother-in-law. One night, while deep in the jungle, the wife woke up to find her mother was missing. Panicked, she rushed to her husband and insisted they go search for her mother. Ben grabbed his rifle, took a swig of whiskey, and headed out to find her. Not long after, they stumbled upon a disturbing scene. The mother-in-law was backed up against a thick, impenetrable bush, with a large male lion standing right in front of her. The wife gasped, "What are we going to do?" Ben looked at the situation, then calmly replied, "Nothing. The lion got himself into this mess. Let him figure it out." Karen lost her husband almost 4 years ago, and her heart had been stuck in mourning ever since. Her daughter kept encouraging her to open her heart and give love another chance, but Karen just wasn't sure she was ready. After a lot of loving nudges, Karen finally gave in and told her family she was willing to dip her toe back into the dating world, though she had no idea where to start. Her daughter didn't miss a beat and said, "Mom, I know just the man for you." And sure enough, sparks flew. After just 6 weeks of dinner dates, long talks, and plenty of laughs, her new gentleman invited her on a cozy weekend getaway to the Catskills. That first night, as they both got ready for bed, Karen slipped out of her clothes and stood there in nothing but a black bra and a pair of black lace pants. He, on the other hand, wore only his birthday suit. He couldn't help but ask, "Why the black underwear?" Karen gave him a sweet smile and replied, "My heart's finally open, my arms are ready for hugs, but down there, I'm still in mourning." Safe to say, the poor guy got the message loud and clear. The very next night, the same scene unfolded. Karen, still in her black pants, and him in his birthday suit. But this time with a little twist. He was wearing a black condom. Surprised, Karen raised an eyebrow and asked, "What's with the black condom?" With a wink and a grin, he replied, "I just wanted to offer my deepest condolences." A blonde is sitting next to a lawyer on a plane, and he's eager to test her intelligence. He offers her 10-to-1 odds. For every question she can't answer, she owes him $5, but for every question he can't answer, he'll give her $50. She agrees, and the game begins. The lawyer asks, "What's the distance between the Earth and the nearest star?" The blonde hands him $5, no questions asked. Then it's her turn. "What goes up a hill with 3 legs and comes down with 4? The lawyer is totally stumped. He spends hours Googling, making calls, but he can't find the answer. Finally, frustrated, he gives up and hands her $50. The blonde puts the $50 in her purse, and the lawyer says, "Okay, what's the answer?" Without saying a word, the blonde hands him $5. On her very first day as the new manager at the senior community, she gathered everyone in the common room and laid down the law. "All right, let's go over a few things," she began. "The ladies' dorm is strictly off limits to all the men, and the men's dorm is the same for the ladies. If anyone is caught breaking this rule, it's a $20 fine for the first offense." She looked around the room, letting the tension build, then added, "Second time, it's a $60 fine, and the third time, a hefty $180 fine. Got it?" A quiet moment passed before an older gentleman stood up, flashed a cheeky smile, and asked, "So, what's the price for an all-access pass?" So there I was, minding my own business during lunch, when I spotted this sweet little old lady sitting on a park bench, bawling her eyes out like she'd just watched the ending of Titanic on repeat. Being the curious and nosy person I am, I sat down next to her and gently asked, "Ma'am, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" Through her sniffles, she managed to say, "I have a 22-year-old husband at home. Every morning he wakes me with love, then makes me pancakes, sausage, fresh fruit, and freshly ground coffee." I sat there confused and asked, "That sounds like a dream come true. So why the tears?" She wiped her nose and continued, "At lunch, he makes me homemade soup, bakes my favorite brownies, and loves me silly for the rest of the afternoon." Now I'm really baffled, so I ask again, "But ma'am, why are you still crying?" She sighed and said, "For dinner, he prepares a fancy meal, pours me wine, whips up my favorite dessert, and then makes love to me until 2 a.m. At this point, my jaw was on the floor. I blurted out, "Lady, people would pay for that life. Why on earth are you crying?" She looked at me, wiped a tear, and said the punchline of the century, "Because I can't remember where I live." A man with a winking problem is applying for a position as a sales representative for a large firm. The interviewer looks over his papers and says, "This is phenomenal. You've graduated from the best schools, your recommendations are wonderful, and your experience is unparalleled. Normally, we'd hire you without a second thought. However, a sales representative has a highly visible position, and we're afraid that your constant winking will scare off potential customers. I'm sorry. We can't hire you." "But wait," the man says. "If I take 2 aspirin, I'll stop winking." "Really? Great. Show me." So the applicant reaches into his jacket pocket and begins pulling out all sorts of red, blue, ribbed, flavored. Finally, at the bottom, he finds a packet of aspirin. He tears it open, swallows the pills, and stops winking. "Well," said the interviewer, "that's all well and good, but this is a respectable company, and we will not have our employees womanizing all over the country." "Womanizing? What do you mean? I'm a happily married man." "Well then, how do you explain all these "Oh, that," he sighed. "Have you ever walked into a pharmacy winking and asked for aspirin?" A woman walks into a pharmacy and asks, "Excuse me, do you have any bottom deodorant?" The pharmacist, confused, says, "Bottom deodorant? I'm sorry, we don't sell anything like that." But the woman insists, "I always buy it here. I've been using it for months." Curious, the pharmacist asks, "Do you have the container it came in?" She nods and rushes out to her car, returning with the deodorant. The pharmacist looks at it and says, "This is just a regular stick of underarm deodorant." The woman, slightly annoyed, reads the label out loud. Well, it clearly says, "To apply, push up bottom." A fireman comes home from work and tells his wife, "We've got a great system at the station. Bell 1 means put on our gear. Bell 2 means slide down the pole. Bell 3 means we're on the truck. So from now on, we're going to run the house the same way. When I say bell 1, you get undressed. Bell 2, hop into bed. Bell 3, time for some firefighting action." The next night, he walks in and yells, "Bell 1!" She gets undressed. "Bell 2!" She jumps into bed. "Bell 3!" They get started. After 2 minutes, she suddenly yells, "Bell 4!" He's confused. "What's bell 4?" She looks at him and says, "More hose! You're nowhere near the fire." 2 nuns were strolling through the grocery store when they walked past the beer and wine aisle. One nun turned to the other and said, "Wouldn't it be nice to have a cold beer tonight?" The second nun smiled but replied, "It would, but I'd feel too embarrassed buying it." The first nun confided. She picked up a 6-pack and walked to the cashier. Sensing the cashier's puzzled look, the nun smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, this is for washing our hair." Without missing a beat, the cashier reached under the counter, added a pack of pretzel sticks to the bag, and said, "The curlers are on me." A couple was celebrating their 50th anniversary, surrounded by their 3 grown children. All of them had achieved great success, so the parents were overjoyed to have everyone together for a special dinner. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad," said their eldest son, a highly respected surgeon. "Sorry for being late. I had an urgent case at the hospital and couldn't make it on time, but I promise I'll make it up to you." The father grinned and said, "No need for gifts, son. We're just glad to have you here with us today." The next to arrive was the second son, a successful corporate lawyer. "You both look wonderful," he said, shaking his head. "I literally flew in from a business trip to make this dinner. Didn't get a chance to pick up a present." The father nodded. "It's all right, we're just happy to see you." Finally, their daughter, a top-tier marketing executive, rushed in. "Happy anniversary. Apologies for being late. My boss has me traveling non-stop, and I didn't have a second to grab a gift." Once dessert was served, the father cleared his throat and said, "There's something we've kept from you all for years. Your mother and I, though we were very much in love, never got married. We were simply too poor to have a wedding, but we worked hard to send each of you to college." The children stared at each other, stunned, before they all blurted out, "Wait, are you saying we're not really your legal kids?" The father smirked. "Exactly, and you all got a free ride to college, so I'd say you're lucky, and on the cheap side." A woman walked into the local pharmacy and calmly asked the pharmacist, "Excuse me, do you sell cyanide?" The pharmacist raised an eyebrow and asked, "Why would you need cyanide?" She replied without missing a beat, "I need it to deal with my husband." Shocked, the pharmacist immediately said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that. That's illegal, and I want no part of it." Without saying a word, the woman reached into her purse and pulled out a photo. It was a picture of the pharmacist's wife, caught in a very compromising situation with her husband. The pharmacist looked at the photo, sighed, and said, "Well, why didn't you tell me you had proof? That changes everything." One day, an out-of-work mime was wandering around the zoo, hoping to make a little money performing for visitors. Just as he started to gather a small crowd, the zookeeper pulled him aside and brought him into his office. The zookeeper explained that the zoo's most popular gorilla had sadly passed away, and they hadn't found a replacement yet. Worried about losing visitors, he offered the mime an unusual job: dress up in a gorilla suit and pretend to be the gorilla until they could get a new one. The mime, needing work, agreed. The next morning, before the zoo opened, he put on the gorilla suit and stepped into the enclosure. To his surprise, the job was easy. Swing on some ropes, eat bananas, nap, and entertain visitors. In fact, the crowds loved him even more than the real gorilla. But after a while, he got bored of the same old routine. He noticed that more people were gathering around the lion's cage next door. Not wanting to lose his audience, he climbed the enclosure wall, dangled dangerously close to the lion's cage, and started showing off. The crowd went wild, and the zookeeper was so impressed, he even gave the mime a raise. Day after day, the mime got braver, and the crowds got bigger. But one afternoon, while performing his usual stunt, he lost his grip and fell right into the lion's cage. Terrified, he ran in circles with the lion chasing him. Out of pure panic, the mime finally shouted, "Help! Somebody help me!" The lion pounced, pinned him to the ground, and quietly growled, "Shh! Be quiet, or we're both going to lose our jobs!" In a small coastal village, a fisherman was strolling up the dock, proudly carrying 2 large, lively lobsters, one in each hand. The only problem? Lobster season had ended 3 weeks ago. Just as he reached the end of the dock, he bumped right into the local fisheries officer. The officer raised an eyebrow and said, Well, looks like I've finally caught you red-handed. 2 fresh lobsters, and the season's been closed for weeks." The fisherman shook his head and replied, "Oh, you've got it all wrong. These aren't just any lobsters. These 2 are trained. I caught them before the season ended." The officer blinked. "Trained? What do you mean?" The fisherman explained, "Every day I bring them down here for a swim. I let them stretch their legs in the water while I sit and enjoy a smoke. When I'm done, I give a little whistle, and they come right back to me." The officer, curious but skeptical, said, "All right, let's see this for myself." So they walked back down the dock. Under the officer's watchful eye, the fisherman carefully placed both lobsters into the water. Then he sat on the dock, lit a cigarette, and relaxed. 15 minutes passed. The officer finally asked, "Well, aren't you going to whistle for them?" The fisherman looked around and replied, "Whistle for who?" The officer said, "For your lobsters, of course." The fisherman grinned and said, "What lobsters?" A woman was sitting at her favorite salon, getting her hair styled before an exciting trip to Rome with her boyfriend. As she chatted about her plans, her hairdresser couldn't help but jump in with her 2 cents. "Rome? Why on earth would you go there?" the hairdresser scoffed. "It's crowded, noisy, and crawling with tourists. Total waste of money. How are you even getting there?" The woman smiled and replied, "We booked a great deal with Continental Airlines." The hairdresser wrinkled her nose. "Continental? Ugh, their planes are ancient, their flights are always late, and don't even get me started on their food. So where are you staying?" "We're staying at this charming boutique hotel by the Tiber River called the Testi." The hairdresser chuckled. "Charming? Please, that place is a dump. Tiny rooms, rude staff, and you'll be lucky if the sheets aren't older than the Colosseum. What do you plan to do there?" "We hope to visit the Vatican, and maybe even catch a glimpse of the Pope." At that, the hairdresser burst out laughing. "You see the Pope? You and about 1,000,000 other tourists. He'll look like a tiny speck in the distance. Good luck with that dream." Fast forward a month later, the woman returned to the salon for another appointment. The hairdresser, still curious and a bit smug, asked, "So, how was that magical trip to Rome?" The woman beamed. "It was incredible. Our flight was overbooked, so we got bumped to first class. Champagne, gourmet meals, the whole 9 yards. And the hotel? Turns out they'd just finished a $5 million renovation. When we checked in, they were overbooked too, so they upgraded us to the owner's suite for free." The hairdresser, now clearly losing steam, muttered, "Well, I'm sure you didn't meet the Pope, though." The woman grinned. "Actually, while we were at the Vatican, a Swiss guard came over and invited me to meet the Pope in his private study. A few minutes later, he walked in, shook my hand, and even said something personal to me." The hairdresser's eyes nearly popped out of her head. "No way! What did he say?" The woman replied with a wink. "He said, 'Where did you get that terrible haircut?'" 3 guys were out golfing on a beautiful sunny day. At one hole, they had to hit over a water hazard. The first guy hits his ball, splash, right into the water. No problem, he walks over, raises his club, and the water parts. He takes his shot and lands it on the green. The second guy hits his ball. It floats on the water. He casually walks across the surface, hits it, and lands it on the green, too. The third guy hits his ball, straight into the water. A fish grabs it. A hawk swoops down and grabs the fish. Lightning strikes, scaring the hawk, and it drops the fish into a tree. The ball pops out of the fish's mouth, bounces down the tree, rolls across the green, and drops right into the hole. Moses looks at Jesus and says, "I swear I hate golfing with your father." Murphy from Dublin decided to expand the line of furniture in his store, so he decided to go to Paris to see what he could find. After arriving in Paris, he visited with some manufacturers and selected a line that he thought would sell well back home. To celebrate the new acquisition, he decided to visit a small bistro and have a glass of wine. As he sat enjoying his wine, he noticed that the small place was quite crowded and that the other chair at his table was the only vacant seat in the house. Before long, a very beautiful young Parisian girl came to his table, asked him something in French, which Murphy could not understand, so he motioned to the vacant chair and invited her to sit down. He tried to speak to her in English, but she did not speak his language. After a couple of minutes of trying to communicate with her, he took a napkin and drew a picture of a wine glass and showed it to her. She nodded, so he ordered a glass of wine for her. After sitting together at the table for a while, he took another napkin and drew a picture of a plate with food on it, and she nodded. They left the bistro and found a quiet cafe that featured a small group playing romantic music. They ordered dinner, after which he took another napkin and drew a picture of a couple dancing. She nodded and they got up to dance. They danced until the cafe closed and the band was packing up. Back at their table, the young lady took a napkin and drew a picture of a 4-poster bed. To this day, Murphy has no idea how she figured out he was in the furniture business. I was sitting at a bar one night when I noticed an old, very drunk man pestering this huge, tough-looking guy at the next table. The old man kept leaning in, slurring, "I slept with your mother." The big guy, calm as ever, just ignored him. But the old man wasn't done. He poked the guy and repeated louder, "Hey, I slept with your mother." Finally, after hearing it one too many times, the tough guy stood up, grabbed the old man by the jacket, and started pulling him toward the door. As he dragged him out, he shouted, "That's enough. We're going home, Dad. You're drunk." 3 girls worked together in the same office, all under the same female boss. Day after day, they noticed the boss would always sneak out of work early. One afternoon, the girls hatched a plan. As soon as the boss left, they'd clock out too. After all, the boss never called or came back, so who would ever know? That day, as planned, they followed through. The brunette went home, enjoyed some peaceful time in her garden, played with her little boy, and even managed to get to bed early. The redhead hit the spa, squeezed in a workout, and still had time to meet her date for dinner. The blonde was excited to surprise her husband, so she quietly tiptoed into the house. But as she neared the bedroom, she heard a strange, muffled sound. Curious, she eased the door open, only to find her husband in bed with her boss. Shocked and heartbroken, she gently closed the door and slipped back out. The next day, during their coffee break, the brunette and redhead were already plotting to leave early again. They turned to the blonde and asked if she was in. "Not a chance," the blonde snapped. "I almost got caught yesterday." A young man on the hunt for the perfect used motorcycle. After weeks of scouring the newspaper ads, nothing caught his eye, until one day he stumbled upon a gorgeous, mint-condition Harley sitting proudly with a "for sale" sign. He couldn't believe his luck. The bike was spotless. Curious, he asked the owner, "This bike is beautiful. What's your secret to keeping it in such perfect shape?" The seller grinned and said, "Simple. If rain's coming, just rub Vaseline on the chrome. It keeps it from rusting. Since you're buying the bike here, take my tube of Vaseline, too." The young man bought the Harley and couldn't wait to show it off. First stop, his girlfriend's house. She loved it, being a Harley fan herself. And later that evening, they rode the bike over to her parents' place for dinner. It was his first time meeting them, so he wanted to make a good impression. Just before they walked inside, his girlfriend pulled him aside and whispered, "Babe, I should warn you. My family has this weird tradition. When we eat dinner, nobody speaks. The first person who talks has to do the dishes." He thought, "No big deal, sounds easy enough." And in they went. The moment he stepped into the house, he noticed something odd. There were dirty dishes everywhere, stacked on counters, shelves, even in the living room. Clearly no one in this house liked doing the dishes. Dinner started, and just like she said, total silence. As the minutes ticked by, the young man decided to liven things up. He leaned over, pulled his girlfriend close, and right there at the table, kissed her passionately. Still, no one said a word. Feeling bold, he took things up a notch and, in the middle of dinner, got a little more adventurous with his girlfriend. And yet, total silence. Then he glanced at her mother, who was just as stunning, and thought, why not? So he turned his attention to the mother and repeated the same bold move. Still, not a single peep from anyone. Suddenly, outside, the sky opened up and heavy rain began to pour. Panic hit him. His precious Harley was out there, getting soaked. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the Vaseline tube. At that moment, the father jumped up from his seat and finally broke the silence. "All right, I'll do the darn dishes." A blonde lived with two other blonde roommates, and she was super excited because she had just bought a brand new car. On her way home from the dealership, a sudden hailstorm hit, and her shiny new ride got dented all over. Frustrated, she called the service department to ask what to do. The service chief, being a bit of a prankster, told her to wait for the car to cool down and then blow really hard on the tailpipe. That would supposedly pop the dents out. About 30 minutes later, her roommates walked outside and saw her kneeling behind the car, blowing into the tailpipe as hard as she could. They were confused and asked, "What on earth are you doing?" She sighed and said, "I'm trying to fix the dents, but it's not working." One of her blonde roommates shook her head and said, "You idiot! You have to roll up the windows first." A man walks into a restaurant with a full-grown ostrich behind him. The waitress comes over to take their order. Man: "I'll have a hamburger, fries, and a Coke." Ostrich: "Same." The waitress brings their order and says, "That'll be $6.40. The man pulls out the exact change. This becomes a daily routine. The man and the ostrich always order the same thing, and the man always pays with the exact change. One night, the man says, "I'll have a steak, baked potato, and salad." The ostrich says, "Same." When the bill comes, it's $12.62, and once again, the man pulls out the exact change. The waitress, curious, asks, "How do you always have the exact change?" The man smiles and says, "Well, years ago I found an old lamp, rubbed it, and a genie appeared offering me 2 wishes. My first wish was that whenever I had to pay for something, I'd always have the exact money in my pocket." The waitress is impressed. "That's amazing. Most people would wish for $1 million, but you'll never need anything again." "That's right," says the man. "Milk, a Rolls Royce, whatever. The exact amount is always there." The waitress then asks, "But what about the ostrich?" The man sighs, pauses, and says, "My second wish, a tall chick with long legs who agrees with everything I say."